Hello, world. Good morning, namaste, and Nisam Bulavinaka once again from Sydney, Australia. I am Sashi Singh, and welcome once again to Sashi Singh's Talking Point, going live with episode 53 on Facebook and on YouTube. As always, I request that today, as we go around the world by the wonders of Facebook and YouTube, that you please share the SSTP page on your own timelines so that we may share today's program with as many interested people as possible. To ensure that you receive instant notifications for all future programs, please like the SSTP page and follow us as well. Welcome to the Thinking People's program, Sashi Singh's Talking Point, live on Facebook and on YouTube. Before I welcome my colleague Nikhil Singh, an important announcement to make. Sashi Singh's Talking Point, SSTP, recognizes that questioning, constructive arguments, and opinions are part of conversation, but posts with aggressive personal attacks, profanity, name-calling, swearing, defamatory in nature, and/or threatening will be removed immediately, and offenders will be blocked from being a part of the SSTP program. Let's observe those rules and let's enjoy the program. It's time now to welcome Nikhil Singh. Nikhil, good morning to you.
Good morning, Sashi, and good afternoon to the viewers in Fiji, and also hello to everyone else joining us from around the globe.
Well, Nikhil, in the absence of our chief guest, Mr. Viliame Takayawa, who advised me by email late on Friday that, and I quote, "Apologies, Mr. Singh, we may have to postpone this interview as I will be in Ra for our descendant of indenture labours branch setup, Vinaka." Let me get you in the discussion. It was you who approached Mr. Takayawa and made the initial contact, correct?
That's right, Sashi. I've known Mr. Takeawa for a number of years, and I did reach out to him, and he promptly responded. So I'm at a loss to understand the sudden pulling out by him.
Well, let me tell you. I mean, you got the contact, the email, and the phone number. I phoned the gentleman. He was very obliging, sent his photograph for the poster, and also sent his email address to you, as I said. I then sent him a formal email invitation, got the trailer poster prepared on Thursday night, and published the same on the SSTP page on Facebook. Mr. Takayawa did state to me on Thursday when I spoke to him that he had to be in Ra on Saturday and that it would not be a problem in him being available on Sunday for SSTP. It was based on that commitment that he confirmed his participation. Fast forward to Friday evening, he sent me an email that read, and I quote, "Apologies, Mr. Singh, we may have to postpone this interview as I will be in Ra for our descendant of indenture labours branch setup, Vinaka." I wrote back and I said, and I quote, "I note that you have mentioned the words may have to postpone. Is this contingent upon you returning to Suva in time, or are you cancelling your appearance for Sunday, Vakandua? Kindly confirm, please, so that I know exactly where I stand." Mr. Takayawa wrote back and replied, "My sincere apologies. It's a whole weekend event. We have to continue with the re-energizing of our constituencies in the West. Once again, thank you. May God bless us all." That was it, really. It is most unfortunate because I had a number of crucial questions to ask of the General Secretary of SODELPA. If there were any doubts in appearing on the program, I guess he should not have made a commitment, Nikhil.
Well, Sashi, the fact that he promptly responded to the initial contact and subsequently the promotion on our SSTP page that had generated a lot of interest amongst our viewers, and a lot of people were looking forward to his appearance, and we could have canvassed a number of issues. But Sashi, what would you have raised with him today?
Well, interestingly enough, first of all, Sodelpa had a management board meeting last Friday. So I would have canvassed with him what was the outcome of that meeting, key points that was discussed. Sodelpa has leadership issues. It was suggested by the General Secretary last week that Aseri Randrondro will be the new leader. And then the bombshell announcement by Graham Davies on Grubsheet that Linda Tambuya is being mooted as the new leader of the party certainly would have raised that with the General Secretary. I was also going to ask him about his endorsement of the RFMF, their constitutional mandate. And then another question that should be directed to him was going to be what was the basis? Why did he mention the 2013 Constitution and then state, and I quote, the court's intervention in the same breath? That would have been interesting to see what the response for that was. And one more question that I was definitely going to canvass was to ask him about Sodelpa's stand on the Israel Hamas war, amongst some of the questions, Nikhil. Well, what did you think of those questions?
I think that would have been a really, really good segment today, Sashi, had he appeared. We know that a lot has happened and is happening within Sodelpa. So I trust Mr. Takayawa as well, and we hope to have him back when he's available. But disappointing that we cannot go on with segment with him on the show today.
Yes, and I must say one thing that people who've put comments on SSTP, some are nasty comments. Please don't do that. The man agreed to appear, and he's got commitments for the party. Setting up new branches is not easy, takes a lot of hard work. So I apologize to our viewers who were looking forward to a robust discussion this morning. Well, what can we do? We move on. We rely on the willingness and the availability of people to be guests on this program. And if they change their mind, it is their ultimate decision, and we just have to respect that. Nikhil, I say, let us, as always, begin with your segment of the events making the news highlights in Fiji. And if you have the time and allow me, I would like to have a little Talanoa session with you after you've done your news segment. We can discuss some of the interesting things happening back in Fiji. Would you be available for that?
Sounds like a good plan, Sashi. Always good to have a Talanoa with you.
All right. Well, let's begin your segment, Nikhil. A lot of murmurs about a People's Alliance party member of Parliament and a cabinet minister being approached to take over as leader of Sodelpa in the recent days. Has anyone from Sodelpa responded to that?
So actually, this is one we probably can have a bit of Talanoa about later on, but I pulled this from the FBC. The FBC reports that Sodelpa has categorically denied allegations of soliciting People's Alliance deputy leader rather, Linda Tambuya, to defect and assume leadership upon Mr. Gavuko's impending departure next year. General Secretary Viliame Takayawa dismissed these claims as, I quote, fake news, emphasizing that no such discussions occurred during the recent board meeting. The General Secretary asserts that Tambuya's resignation as a government MP would be a prerequisite for a transition, deeming it implausible. Sashi?
All right, as you said, we will discuss that in a little bit more depth during our Talanoa session. Now, as the country finally sees the light at the end of the tunnel, insofar as municipal elections are concerned, former supervisor of elections and prominent Suva lawyer John Apted has a simple but pertinent message for citizens. What is this message, Nikhil?
Sashi, I think this message goes beyond the topic here, which is municipal elections, because as you know, we covered in previous episodes, including last week, that a government must be held accountable. And what John Apted has said is reported by Fiji Times is that a lot of people have become complacent when it comes to demanding accountability and transparency from the authorities. He was speaking at a panel discussion on the electoral design in Suva on Monday last week. Upbeat said it was important to get a council that looked after the interests of the people and businesses in that town. He said that the last election that we had was in 2005. That's 19 years ago. So that has really two consequences. According to Upbeat, he said, quote, people don't remember what a council is supposed to do, even the people who work in the council don't know what an elected council is supposed to do. The people of these municipalities themselves have forgotten and that they have a right to control the council. He further tells us, and I quote, it also tells you the amount of work that needs to be done. It is also relevant to the electoral design because you cannot assume when you're picking your electoral system that people are going to behave as they do for national elections. So he's setting the scene for the authorities, for the government to decide on the electoral process, Sashi. And there's an underlying message about national elections. Has that been working? What do we need to do? Do we need to change to really encourage people to be participating in this in the democratic process?
All right, and RFMF Commander Rochone Kaluniwai has delivered a message to all Fijians at the Remembrance Day service held last week. The commander has been in the news lately, sharing the military's view on certain government decisions. What did he say last week?
Yes, Sashi, as you note that the commander has made statements which has prompted the Home Affairs Minister to come and respond and assure the nation that everything's good between the military and the government. So last week, the commander at this Remembrance Day function or event emphasized the blessing of peace and the ongoing commitment to maintaining stability and fostering open dialogue in Fiji. Kalonewai acknowledged the unique perspective of ex servicemen and women who have experienced war, described Fiji as a peaceful haven upon their return. So there is that message of comfort from the Commander Sashi for those who have been following the exchange between the commander and the line minister.
All right, Nikhil, thank you for those headlines. We'll begin our Talanoa session in just a moment. I'd also like to encourage those viewers who are with us. If you have comments to share, perhaps let us know what topics or who you'd like to see appear on the show. At the end of the program, when I've finished speaking with Nikhil, I'll share some news I've got about the Prime Minister appearing on this show. I've also got a confirmation about a government minister coming soon to this program, and word about the opposition party and whether they will appear on SSTP or not. So I'll share that with you right towards the end of the program once I've had my discussion with Nikhil. And to acknowledge a few of our viewers who are sending Diwali messages and best wishes. Api Bhavandra, thank you very much, Kemani. Welcome to the show. Reshma Singh, Vinod Chandra, uh, greetings and happy Diwali to you. Ma Tamani says Bulavinaka, likewise to you. Naresh Kumar from Newcastle, a regular on SSTP, sending greetings. Chandra Segrin, I believe from Melbourne, if I'm not wrong, says good morning, Sashi and Nikhil Singh. Yes, Chandra, thank you, and happy Diwali to you. Vinesh Kumar wishes us Diwali, Nikhil. And our regular, all the way from Vatwalevu in Nandi, says happy Diwali as well in Bulavinaka. And that is Dhaka Dhaka Masavesi Chochi. Nise Andavinaka, Dhaka Dhaka, I hope you are well. And Eric Singh says Jai Ho. Well, Nikhil, let's begin our little Talanoa session. During last Sunday's program on SSTP, the Deputy Prime Minister, Biman Prasad, confirmed that the per diem for the Prime Minister was $3,000 per day. However, when he appeared in another interview this week, the Deputy Prime Minister Prasad confirmed that the figure was actually $3,400 per diem. Now, those who follow Graham Davis's grub sheet would have seen that there are some mind blowing figures being revealed. What are your comments on this, Nikhil?
Well, life's good, isn't it, Sashi? It's a good gig to have. But look, these figures, on a serious note, they are mind blowing. If you look at this situation on the ground in Fiji, and this talk about the cost of living, the heartbreaking stories that you hear from the citizens, and on the other hand, you've got a string of ministers and government officials on overseas trips earning this kind of getting this kind of money. That is quite sad. It's sad state of affairs when you look at the amount itself. I think the Prime Minister is, I think, researched by the blog Grub Sheet, $200,000, above $200,000. So if you look at the minimum wage in Fiji, this is an area that needs immediate focus, Sashi.
Well, perhaps at this juncture, I agree with you, it needs immediate focus. And the Deputy Prime Minister did mention that, and I'll come to that. Perhaps at this juncture, though, I should explain what per diem means. Per diem, from Latin, means for by the day, refers to daily allowances paid to employees to cover costs incurred while on a business trip. Business expenses that are covered typically include accommodation, food, and other incidental expenses, such as fees and tips for services. Nikhil, let me give you my own example. In those old days when I was employed by the Fiji Broadcasting Commission, years ago, there were occasions when I was sent overseas for training, or I would travel overseas to do soccer commentaries when the Fiji soccer team, was traveling overseas. There were times when I had no choice, and all my international travel, accommodation, food, internal travel, they were all paid for. However, there were times when I received a per diem. That was when I had to pay all my own expenses and claim that as a per diem before I left, or in some cases when I returned and presented my receipts, etc. It was never a case of my receiving a per diem and then getting all my expenses paid at the same time. I could either take the per diem and make my own arrangements of where I would live, etc., or the company paid for everything and I didn't get any pocket money out of that. To explain that further, let me try and bring on the screen a per diem example used by the New Zealand Minister of Foreign Affairs recently. I hope our viewers can see that. So, estimated cost, for example, flights for two people from Auckland to Suva, $7,854. Accommodation, 3 nights for two people, $2,595. Meals for those 3 days, they've done 6 meals for two people, $480. Hospitality and events, $100 per person, totals $200. Four gifts, $600. Miscellaneous, $50. Subtotal is $11,779, and the contingency for that is 1767. And the recommendation, if you can see that, the minister writes, I recommend that the cabinet authorize my absence from New Zealand from 13 to 16 September 2023 to travel to Suva, Fiji, and agree that I will be accompanied by a private secretary from my office. Note that I will also be accompanied by, what is it, officials from the Ministry and Trade, etc., etc., and that is signed by the Honourable Minister Nanaya Mahuta. Now, Nikhil, nowhere in there is an expense that is given to the minister for being absent from New Zealand. Nothing like $3,400 a day or even 2,000 or any expense like that. What are your thoughts on this when you see that kind of claim being submitted?
Well, I think the first comment I'll make there is if you look at the accountability and transparency of this, so it's all laid out, and of course there is an ask on cabinet to authorize that. Now, I'm not saying that that is not happening in Fiji, but Sashi, I think it goes back to the definition of per diems you just gave. Are we looking at a situation of double dipping where you are claiming for expenses or your expenses are being budgeted, but then on top of all of that, because one of the glaring omissions from that table that you just shared is there is no column which says, all the expenses and a column which says per diem. So that is a quite a striking sort of thing about that spreadsheet, that you've got all your budget for accommodation and so forth. There's no per diem in that. Are we seeing a case of double dipping? I'm just asking that as a question.
Well, I mean, it's mind-boggling that per diem, for example, for the Prime Minister, $3,400. Then it seems all the travel is being catered for, I assume. All the accommodation, all the transport, all the meals, all of that allegedly is taken care of, plus the $3,400. Well, let's move on. The Deputy Prime Minister has also said that these allowances will be reviewed in the next session of Parliament. Well, the next session of Parliament was supposed to be for 2 weeks. However, it has now been reduced to just 1 week of parliamentary sitting from the 20th to the 24th of November. And I really wonder whether the subject of allowances will be reviewed. The minister mentioned that, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance. What is your thought on that?
Sashi, one of the things that comes to mind is the credibility of any government. And the credibility really depends on what the parties say before the election, and if they form government, what do they actually do after the elections. So if you look at election promises, this group that we've got now, the government, were in opposition 16 years, and they made a lot of noise about this in Parliament, rightly so. But after the elections, 11 months in, almost closing almost to a year, we are still yet to see material difference made to these allowances. There has been no motion as yet. We heard from the Deputy Prime Minister that there will be a motion coming, but 11 years in, I would have thought that this was a priority area for the government, particularly when they acknowledge the suffering of the poor. You look at the cost of living, and I'm sure we'll probably have a bit to say on that and discuss about cost of living. But when inflation is through the roof, when the poor are suffering, the vulnerable, one would have thought that tightening the belt would be an immediate thing that the government would do. That has not happened. And there is nothing stopping the government from taking action, from taking immediate action, Sashi. You don't really need to have a motion in Parliament. You can actually voluntarily say that you will not be applying these per diems, the ridiculous amount of per diems for your overseas travel. That's the first thing you can do. You don't need a motion. But the other thing that you might have a little smirk on your face, Sashi, is where is the Standing Order 51? This is something that the government could have done in the very few early days of government. Bring a motion in. This is where you could have applied Standing Order 51. Get it done. Get on with the job.
Well, we'll see what happens at the next sitting of Parliament. All eyes will be on that to see what happens to the per diem. There is talk that it's going to be reduced, but I'd like to say, if it is double dipping, please stop double dipping. It's either or.
Sashi, can I also make another point? When you talk about priorities, there has been no concrete action whilst we hear about a motion going into Parliament But what has happened is government has set up a parliamentary emoluments committee to review the salaries of MPs, of government of member of parliament. So if you could go ahead and do take those steps, this is the committee reviewing the salaries of government MPs. Now, the concern there is you've got 5 government MPs in this committee, so these people will be reviewing their own salaries. I don't want to preempt the outcome of that committee because what is there to say that the outcome will not be a revised salary downwards, but the optics of this looks really bad on the government, Sashi. You still haven't done anything about these exorbitant per diems, but you've set up a committee to look at your own salaries. Um, that looks really bad. The optics of it is really bad.
I take your point, Nikhil, and when you say that 5 government members are in that committee, it's akin to Dracula looking after the blood bank. But let's keep our fingers crossed that positive things do happen at the next sitting of Parliament, and we'll keep our eyes open for that. Someone's just posted that one of the guests should be Vilam Ngavoka, and I would welcome that. There's a lot to speak with Deputy Prime Minister Ngavoka about his tourism portfolio as well as leadership, etc. So hopefully, one of these days, we have the privilege of talking to him. Talking of SODELPA, Nikhil, let me ask you, do you think the party is currently in crisis? Because, firstly, there was the announcement last week citing the General Secretary that Aseri Randrondro was going to be the next leader of SODELPA. Then, when William Ngavoka was questioned on Friday after the SODELPA management meeting at the Southern Cross Hotel in Suva, he said the issue had made its way to the media, but it's a work in progress. He said it is his 3rd term in Parliament and he will see how everything goes. Your thoughts on that?
Sashi, I think probably will not go as far as saying the party is in crisis, but I would have loved to be a fly on the wall at that management board meeting in Suva. But Sodelpa has had its fair share of problems. It goes back to immediately after the election of the coalition government. They had a lot of issues with their general secretary, Mr. Nduru. He resigned, then he said he did not resign, then he resigned again, and so forth. So this internal bickering has been ongoing in Sodelpa. You've got what appears to be, or at least forming to be, a power struggle with names being dropped of Mr. Randrondro. But then now, in recent days, that Linda Tambuya has been approached to take on the leadership after Mr. Gavoka steps down. So these are not small matters for any party. For Sodelpa, they really need to address these issues and focus on the game ahead, which is being a coalition partner, a integral member of the government to ensure that there is stability. Because let's not forget, this will also impact on the stability of the 3-party government.
Well, you stole the words out of my mouth. You mentioned Linda Tambuya. Now, what about the big bombshell announcement by Grubsheet on Saturday with the headlines, "Is Linda the next Sodelpa leader?" I wish the General Secretary was here to talk about that. Now, first, what about the revelations made by Graham Davis and his Grubsheet blog about Linda Tambuya?
So actually, Graham Davis is a person who has been inside of government for a good part of 16 years, so he has built his network, and I will not doubt his sources. So he's got some very credible sources that do share these things with him. So I will not be surprised if attempts have been made to approach Linda Tambuya. Now, if you look at Ms. Tamboya and her political career so far, there is a bit of a pattern because she was a candidate for the PDP once. She jumped to Sodelpa, and then she jumped to PAP. Now, what's not to say that she's ready to jump back to Sodelpa? If you just look at the pattern, if I base that on the pattern, I will not be surprised. And given that these news has been circulating, at least in the social media, I'm sure there is some discussions happening about this issue with Linda Tambuya.
Well, what kind of impact do you think Grubsheet's headline will have on the People's Alliance Party, if any?
Well, I think it goes to expose, I guess. We were just mentioning about and using the word crisis in Sodelpa, but it goes to show that there are issues in PAP as well. We know that in recent weeks that Linda Tambuya was relieved of her role as the government whip, and then there was news circulating that she was not too happy with that decision. So I'm sure the discussions within Sodelpa, within PEP, is not all hunky dory. There's got to be some friction as a result of the decision made by the Prime Minister, really.
Okay. Well, as I said, my invitation is open to the management of the Sodelpa Party, either for the General Secretary or for the leader, William Ngavoka, to come on the program and talk about their party, their policies, and where they are heading to. That invitation is open, gentlemen. I hope you take that invitation on board. Moving on, Nikhil, I note that the Fiji Labour Party has raised a number of points against the administration. Firstly, on the international front, the Fiji Labour Party says it deplores the Ramuka government's foreign policy stand supporting gross human rights violations in Israel and China. Your comments.
Sashi, this is in relation, and what Mr. Chowdhury or the FLP is referring to is Fiji's recent vote at the UN. They went against the UN resolution in the weekend, in that weekend, calling for sustainable truce in the Israeli Gaza war to allow emergency humanitarian aid to be channeled through to the victims of the war. Mr. Chowdhury says, apart from its no vote on the UN resolution, Fiji has also withdrawn its name from a list of 51 nations, calling on China to end its human rights violation against the Uyghur and Muslim minorities in Xinjiang. So these are the two things that has been highlighted by the FLP. Think that Fiji has probably gone the wrong way, and that they should have really stuck with the majority and voted against the motion against China, and also supported the truce, the calling of the truce in the Israeli Gaza war, Sashi.
Eric Singh has just posted a comment, Nikhil, that says this is the appropriate time to bring MPC, that's Mahendrapal Chaudhry, Sashi. He writes, the number of voters supported him are important citizens of our nation, so they are not irrelevant. People of Fiji needs to hear someone who will make sense on subjects many don't have guts to speak about. Well, Eric Singh, let me tell you, I have heard from a source yesterday, from one of our colleagues, that Mr. Chaudhry has said after Diwali he is willing to come on to SSTP, and that respect and invitation will be accorded to him. So watch this space, and I hope to be talking to Mr. Chaudhry, who has been quite feisty in recent weeks, which brings me to another point, Nikhil, on the Labour Party. They had the delegates conference last week. Anything to share on that front at all?
Sashi, I think no surprises. There's a lot of discussion about, again, the cost of living crisis in Fiji, and what are the measures that needs to be taken, and the proposals that the FSU is submitting forward for the authorities to consider. The FLP has confirmed that they will contest the municipal elections that is being in the preparations for which is underway. They've also have made a statement about holding the government to account on their promises, and they'd like to see that all promises that made be delivered. So the delegates, about close to 100 delegates, converged Nandi last week, Sashi, and I am yet to receive a copy of the resolutions, but really it was about the economy, the state of the economy, the cost of living, and the fact that the FFP is starting to make preparations to contest the municipal elections.
Interesting. And let's see when the resolutions are given to you, what they are. It's going to be quite revealing, I feel. Take a little sip of water if you've got some there. Have a break. You are watching Sashi Singh's Talking Point, and our chief guest today is no one. Today is just a Sashi and a Nikhil show, an in-house SSTP program touching on some issues of concern to the people of Fiji. And if you have suggestions to make on our comments page, on our comment section, of who you'd like to see as a future guest or issues you think really go to the heart of the problems in Fiji, please put those on the comment section, and if I can share them today, I will. Nikhil, you mentioned the cost of living. As I said to the Deputy Prime Minister Biman Prasad last week, the ordinary person on the street in Fiji is in a lot of pain. There are several thousands of families struggling, trying to make ends meet. If this was not bad enough, the ANZ Bank has announced that inflation in Fiji could be as high as 13%, 13%. Their figures seem to be at odds with the Bureau of Statistics. What can you elaborate on this front?
Sashi, the Fiji Village, first of all, has reported on this statement by ANZ's economist, Dr. Sen. And what Dr. Sen is saying is the rate of inflation could be a lot higher than 6% that has been projected by the Reserve Bank of Fiji by the end of the year. As he says, it could be high as 13%, as you've highlighted. What he also says is that what the average customer is feeling is way more than what the Fiji Bureau of Stats is telling us. He says the current CPI, or Consumer Price Index, or the basket of goods and services that the Bureau of Statistics measures month to month, was created using the household income expenditure survey done in 2008, Sashi. So that's a while back. He says consumer spending has changed.
All right, and the ANZ Bank economist says that there is an urgent need to update the components of the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, and the weights that are assigned to it. Are there any concerns expressed about the true rate of inflation in the country?
Well, for example, Dr. Sen says food manufacturers have said that the price of production has gone up 25 to 30%, and a lot of that has been passed on to the consumer. He goes on to say that just because an item may not have price control, that does not mean the price will not increase, as control is only on the margin. So if a retailer proves to the FCCC that the cost has gone up and they cannot absorb it, then they have to pass it on, Sashi.
All right. It'll be interesting to see when the next set of figures come out from the Bureau of Statistics. But
it will be. Sorry, it will be, Sashi. Can I just finish up on the ANZ's report?
Yeah.
Going back to the episode last week, you had given a really good example to the Deputy Prime Minister, and I think you used the price of rewa butter.
Yes.
Now, I want to tell you that I'm not sure if the FCCC were glued to the episode last week. What has happened last week is the FCCC has come out and said that railway butter price is being reduced significantly. The FCCC's CEO, Joel Edwin, has attributed that to lower lending costs, but I'm sure the SSTP did highlight that um, example last week.
Yes, indeed. I quoted a 500 gram packet of butter costing around about $12.51 or 50 cents. And I saw that it's now being reduced to $10 something. Thank God for little mercies, I guess. Now, Nikhil, you'll remember way, way back in February, 20th of February 2022. That was episode 9. And our chief guest then was Felix Anthony, the current General Secretary of the National Union of Workers and the National Secretary of the Fiji Trades Union Congress. I vividly remember Felix's account of the draconian measures taken against the unions in Fiji during the last 16 years' rule of the Fiji First Party. Since the coalition government's been in power, what is the industrial landscape like today in Fiji? Has anything changed?
Sachi, it has, but I think let's not forget the sacrifices made by Felix Anthony and other union leaders. These people have been picked up from their homes in the middle of the night, in front of their families, driven to Suva, thrown in the cell. One of the examples that I do want to share is, which people might not know, the extent of which the previous regime used to operate and stifle trade union activity is the arrest of Mr. Anthony at the ministry's conference room, level 4 Civic House, in front of the director of the ILO, the then Minister for Employment, and other executives from employers and worker organizations who had gathered for a good faith meeting. I mean, you can't make this up. Gathered for a good faith meeting at the Labour Ministry's office in Civic House, level 4. Mr. Anthony was there, but he was arrested as the meeting was going. This was in May 2019. And I mentioned on numerous occasions that he's had to endure, being incarcerated. But what's changed, Sashi, is that I think it was quite encouraging and promising to hear the new Labour Minister, Minister for Labour and Employment Relations, when he addressed Parliament, and I've got a few statements with me that he made. And Mr. Agnido Singh, the minister, said, harassment, intimidation, and arrest of trade union leaders, especially when they conduct union activities and highlight grievances facing workers, will now become a thing of the past. That's the assurance he gave, Sashi. He went on to say, we value our people, we value their rights as enshrined under the Constitution and also under the ILO conventions ratified by Fiji. The right to organize and collectively bargain was curtailed under the Fiji First government, and the freedom of assembly and freedom of speech was something that they never allowed under their leadership. 16 years of uncertainty over the right of freedom of association, free speech, right to assembly, and to strike or picket when negotiations with employers fall through will come to an end when unions, employers, and government come together to discuss and reach solutions amicably. So, Sachi, that has changed. The arrest of trade union leaders, the punishment of workers who are union members from conducting union activities, including holding peaceful protests. You might recall, Sashi, several of the FTUC's applications to hold a rally or a march, they were declined. They were rejected by the previous authorities without any reason. So that has somewhat changed, but there's a lot more work to be done. There are assurances from this government that they will get onto it, but I think the comfort we get is that union activity that's back on, workers can actually exercise their fundamental rights, Sashi.
Well said, in fact. And Kudos to the industrial minister, Agnidev Singh, for recognizing that, I guess, to paraphrase, unions have a very important role in society, as they are the safeguard to employees' rights. And as a unionist, you'd welcome that, Nikhil.
Absolutely. And I think the challenge, or what I'd like to see, the immediate action being taken on the reviewing of the minimum wage. I know the Deputy Prime Minister last week said that they will be holding consultations. I think you need to set your priorities, because when you do accept and acknowledge there are people suffering, um, this is work that needs to happen right now.
Nikhil, if I may just digress, I want to share three comments that's come through. While we were talking about the economy, the stats revealed by the economist at the ANZ Bank, Michael Gerard Towler writes in, Dr. Sen also stated that inflation in 2022 was not 13%, but it was close to 21%. He writes, this is both alarming and outrageous. In anyone's figure, that is indeed mind boggling. And interestingly, I just want to share two more comments. Rocky Maharaj wrote, Letters to the Editor, Fiji Sun, November 11th to 12th, Ending Coup Culture by Dr. Chalesi Nakarawa Suva. Encourage SSTP to invite him on the program and all to read his letter. Well, interestingly enough, Chalesi Nakarawa, who writes on the comment section, the coalition appears to have lost its way. Election promises are now distant memories. The best interest of the people or the nation has been sidelined for political survival. Well, if you remember, Nikhil, we had Dr. Chalesi Nakarawa as a guest in the program. And if it's the same Dr. Chalesi Nakarawa who's posted that comment, I'd like to get in touch with you after the program. Be interesting because you were a potential candidate. It'd be interesting to talk to you now, and I'd love to read that article, Ending Coup Culture, and we could get you back on the program. If you are the Chalesi Nakarawa, sir, you have my contact details. Send me a message and let's talk. So that's indeed, some activity on the comments page. Nikhil, one thing of concern to Fiji, there's been a lot of talk about brain drain from Fiji. Last week, when I spoke with Biman Prasad, I suggested that huge numbers of people were leaving Fiji. Some 4,000 have come to Australia to pick fruits. 400 plus doctors and nurses have migrated for greener pastures. Qualified teachers are leaving in large numbers. Something must give for sure. What do you think should be done to address this dire strait of a situation?
Sashi, can I answer that in a second? But what I want to just share with you
Yes.
is some of these concerns that have come from the government itself. So, the Education Ministry Permanent Secretary, Selina Kuruleda, she said that teacher attrition is one of the biggest disruptors of transformation efforts in Fiji's education sector. In 2022, about 320 teachers resigned. Of the resignations in 2018 to 2023, 51% were secondary school teachers, 40% were primary school teachers, and 8% in early childhood education. And the permanent secretary said the teacher attrition was the most serious threat and a challenge to the sustainability of educational process in Fiji. A large majority are in the form of resignations, and we know, Sashi, greener pastures calling. These teachers are leaving in their droves. Similarly, the nurses, the Fiji Nurses Association says it's concerned about the number of nurses leaving the country due to low salaries and the quality of support provided to them by the Ministry of Health from COVID 19 until today. Their General Secretary, Philomena Talawandua says most nurses that are leaving are the ones that are frustrated over the last 16 years because they know that their concerns are being ignored. She says most of the nurses are scared to raise the issues because they were fearing victimization. Now, certainly the environment has changed, Sashi. We've had tons of assurances by the government, including from the Deputy Prime Minister last week, that people can speak out, people can criticize the government. Going back to the question about, what can be done, I think it goes to what sort of programs is the government prepared to develop? How are we incentivizing these teachers and nurses from leaving the shores? Because that is a serious, I think, factor for this government to consider. There has to be some form of incentivizing for these teachers and nurses so they remain. But also the other aspect, I guess, Sashi, is has there been any forward planning? Um, how were how was the government actually trying to attract students in taking up nursing or teaching? What was the trend? What was the forward planning? Did we envisage that people will be leaving their droves? If that was the case, how are we going to counter? How many people are being taken in this field? So, what are you doing to attract students to actually choose the field of teaching or the field of nursing, so that they really go into those fields and get ready by the time the courses finish in 3 or 4 years. So incentivizing and really attracting the students to take up studying in these fields, Sashi.
Well, your keyword there is incentives. As long as you have incentives, and one of the biggest incentives you can provide to your workforce is better standards of living and, of course, better wages. As soon as you can address that, then you've solved half of your problems. The other half, of course, is having programs that can develop learning, programs that you can develop your skill set. Those are very important issues. Now, this government, from the day they took over government with the power of that one vote, started having a lot of consultations. I would like to see an outcome of consultations that can address the brain drain problem. Mark McElrath writes, big words but no solutions. Migration will stop when you increase wages. Exactly what I've just said. You got to address that wages imbalance and make it attractive. I believe Fiji has it within its financial structure, the economy, to make that adjustment. You've got to have those good incentives for people to stay. You agree or disagree, Nikhil?
Absolutely agree, Sashi. I think unless something is done, we are heading for a disaster really in these two fields. Such an important field, teaching, likewise nursing, healthcare. If we're not going to fix this, this is going to bring more problems for the government and more suffering for the people.
All right, Nikhil, you mentioned during your news segment highlights municipal elections. Prior to the general elections of 2022, promises were made about restoring municipal elections. Public consultations for local government elections were held in mid October, and the Ministry of Local Government, announced it was looking to hold elections in the second half of next year. What are your thoughts on the preparations so far? What are your thoughts about it actually happening? I see a few things, Nikhil, if I may add. Our general elections are held on a national constituency basis. The municipal elections will have to come down to locality. For example, Nandi having its own municipal elections and representatives, Lotoka, Suva, etc., Lambasa. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Sashi, let me begin by saying there is light at the end of the tunnel. We know that this promise was made by the then local government minister Praveen Bala, who fronted the camera and said that one of the immediate tasks he had was to hold local government elections. That never eventuated. This government as well made the promise, but we can see there are steps being taken that leads to the elections being held. The Minister for Local Government, Madhu Nalumisa, he said they're looking to amend to try and fix the couple of things you raised, Tashi. They're looking to amend the Local Government Act to reduce, firstly, the voting age from 21 to 18 years, the sitting term to 4 years instead of three, and changing the electoral system. So there's a lot of work that is going in this. There are consultation being held. We know that all major political parties are contributing and attending, participating in this consultation process. Um, Localities, as you mentioned. So, what are the changes or tweaks that needs to be done to the act? These are things I'd like to call work in progress, but certainly very encouraging to see that we are finally heading to municipal elections. As I reported earlier, 16 years of a vacuum in this space. People have forgotten. John Apted has said that people actually have forgotten what a council does. And not only that, people who work for the councils don't know what the elected council does. So, a step in the right direction. Can't wait to see that these elections eventuate.
I just mentioned, well, thank you for those comments, Nikhil, on local government elections, municipal elections. Taking a step back on incentives and wages, Max Ram writes, cost of living is so high, Sashi, even to stop brain drain, the minimum wage needs to be at least $10 per hour, else migration will continue. I mean, comments like that just boggles the mind as to what steps needs to be taken to address this very critical situation. And thank you for those comments. Keep them coming. Abhigandar, you better listen to the end of the program about the announcement I will make, so that might excite you as well. Nikhil, we're coming to the end of our program. Just a couple more subjects that I wanted to touch base on. I don't know whether you remember back to your childhood. There was a time for me, like when I was in school, we used to do a lot of gardening at home. We used to do a lot of gardening in school. Even here in Sydney, we grow our own taro leaves, paji, cabbage, chilies, tomatoes. Last year, we even grew pumpkins. Do you think there is an over reliance on importation of some food items, especially when some of these food items can be grown and produced locally, even on a commercial scale?
Yes, Sashi, and that really I'm at a loss to understand why that is the case. When you look at Fiji, when you look at the agriculture sector, when you look at some of parts of Fiji, fertile ground, I am at a loss to understand why this reliance on importation of things like uh, lamb, for example. Um, in some cases, milk. I'm told we're talking about the lending cost of butter products and so forth. Um, why aren't we actually allocating that sort of that type of budget to the agriculture sector as we are to the military, for example? This is an area that needs a whole lot new look at. We need to assist those farmers because it can be done. It has been done in Fiji before. It can be done again. I know in 1999 the then government had a plan to revitalize the agriculture sector. Unfortunately, that government only was in office for 1 year, but that focus again has to come back to the agriculture sector, and we could do away with all this lending cost with this import duty, and these products that are available made in Fiji would be a whole lot more cheaper for those people. Sashi.
All right, Nikhil. We're just on 1 hour since we've started. Let's try to wrap this up. One very, very important question. Tomorrow is Diwali, the biggest religious festival in the Hindu calendar. How will you be celebrating Diwali, and what is your message to our viewers for Diwali?
Thank you, Sashi. Firstly, happy Diwali to you and your family and all our viewers. This is a time for us to celebrate the good over evil. Tomorrow, it's a whole lot different to celebrating Diwali back home in Fiji. In Australia, it's a weekday. Tomorrow, it's a working day. But I think the message that I'd like to share, Sashi, is not everyone will be in that celebratory mood, particularly in Fiji. We mentioned about the cost of living. Celebrations for a lot of people will be subdued. When you talk about making sweets and savories, all of these things that are associated with celebrating the festival of lights or Diwali will be somewhat subdued. And I think it's a time that we can reflect, help those who are less fortunate, those vulnerable members of the community. But it's one that we need to look after each other.
Well said, Nikhil. I like your thought on those vulnerable people in Fiji who may be struggling during this auspicious Diwali season. Anything else you'd like to say before I conclude today's program?
I wish again everyone a happy Diwali and a prosperous New Year. And I hope to be back in episode 54.
Well, Nikhil Singh, in the absence of our chief guest today, I thank you for stepping in and discussing some very important matters with me today. Let me say, have a safe, happy, and prosperous Diwali. I know you have leave from SSTP for the next 2 weeks due to work commitments, so we won't see you for the next 2 Sundays. We shall see you when you return. I thank you again for sharing your views candidly with our viewers today. Nikhil, once again, thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you, Sashi.
Take care and God bless. Well, SSTP, as I always say, we ask the questions that Fijians all over the world want answers to. That's all for episode 52, but just wait for one moment. I need to announce a few things that has to do with future programs. To my SSTP team, thank you for today's episode. I must also thank all our viewers for watching this program today, even though we did not have a chief guest. And I thank you for your comments that kept coming. Those of you who provided those feedbacks, a big Vinaka Vakalevu to you. Now, let me tell you that I have it on good authority that the Prime Minister, Mr. Sitiveni Rambuka, has agreed to come on SSTP in the new year. He has also indicated that his ministers and assistant ministers will also be encouraged to appear on the program. Thank you very much for that message. And Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much for that very encouraging news. Another revelation I have is that I must share with you is that the Minister for Multi-Ethnic Affairs and Sugar Industry, the Honorable Charanjit Singh, has confirmed his appearance on SSTP for Sunday, 10th December 2023. Now, that is going to be a very captivating interview, I believe. Mr. Singh is, after all, a very successful businessman. He is the minister in charge of the sugar industry, and recently he has come under scrutiny from FICAC. I cannot wait for that interview on the 10th of December this year. And to be fair, the comment section raised issues about my invitation to the opposition party leaders. Let me say, I have sent the opposition leader Inya Seroiratu a few messages, and just yesterday, a close associate of ours rang me and confirmed that he has spoken on my behalf with Mr. Inya Seroiratu, and I am advised that the opposition leader has indicated that he would like to take part in SSTP. Mr. Inyasero Ratu, let me publicly extend an invitation to you to appear on SSTP at a time of your choosing. The same invitation is extended to your parliamentary colleagues in the opposition side. So until next time, as I say, it's time to say goodbye. Have a very safe and a happy week. To all those celebrating Diwali, from my family to yours, I am wishing you a Diwali that is full of warmth from treasured memories, love, and laughter. May the light of the diyas illuminate your way and bring wealth, peace, and pleasure into your life. Happy Diwali from my family to yours. In closing, I leave you with this quote from former British Prime Minister Harold Wilson, who said, "A week is a long time in politics. A week is a long time in politics." That quote from former British Prime Minister Harold Wilson. Remember that, as anything could happen in a week's time or whenever. Till the next program, I am Sashi Singh, bidding you goodbye, namaste, and Nisa Mode. Once again, happy Diwali. Goodbye, world.